everyone, and welcome back to the Black Lawyers Podcast. Today, I have Chief Legal Analyst and anchor, CNN anchor, Laura Coates. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yes.
Uh-huh. Could they possibly? Maybe they're in New York. I thought you were somewhere else. So,
Well, I'm always there, back and forth, and we met in New York. So, like, no, I'm actually based in DC,
yeah.
but the New York is based wherever the story is. So.
Yes, you are based wherever the story is. This is absolutely. So, I make all my guests play a round of hot topics.
Ooh, okay. Okay.
So we're gonna do a legal hot topics today.
Okay.
And so our first topic is Charlie Kirk, who we know was a renowned podcaster, founder of Turning Point USA. They're calling it, I guess it is an assassination in the sense that a sniper, there's a debate. Was it really like a political assassination? Because he wasn't a president. He wasn't someone that served in an actual political position, but his views were political, and he was assassinated. And Congress, which right now is very conservative, as we know, they voted in a resolution for a Remembrance Day. And there was something really interesting about the date of the Remembrance Day that caught a lot of people's attention, which was George Floyd's birthday. And so at first people were like, well, of all the days, why would you use George Floyd's birthday, for remembrance for Charlie Kirk, who obviously would have probably been opposed to George Floyd. And so everyone looks it up and like, oh no, they have the same birthday.
Is that right?
So George Floyd and Charlie have the same birthday. This is why the October date has been selected. So when I thought about that, it was almost obviously like your face it was like the irony, right, of those two people literally sharing the same birthday. But I think also how interesting, how quickly when they want to pass something, they were quickly able to pass this resolution to remember him. It's not a national holiday, but it is a Remembrance Day. But they could not pass something as simple as police reform in George Floyd's thing. If you're listening, there is a George Floyd Reform Act, basically to help against excessive force and racial bias in policing. And the House has passed it twice, but it never obviously passed through the Senate. And so I just want to hear your thoughts. Number one, on just the fact that they have the same birthday and this, how quickly they wanted to do this remembrance holiday. I can't, to be honest with you, recall the last person they were in such a rush to do a Remembrance Day for. Like, I can't actually even think of anybody now that I think about it a little harder. But why they were just maybe so quick to do it, maybe that you think that means. And then just in terms of just, like I said, how at some level I feel like they pick and choose. So.
Well, first of all, I have to say, it does surprise me they have the same birthday. I wonder, I'm somebody who really believes in like signs and wonders. I'm always looking for what is the lesson that we're supposed to take collectively? What is that connection supposed to mean? And how do we as people and in a humanity, what is the journey? What is the lesson in that? Now I'm gonna have to search my brain a little bit to be about what that divine lesson might be in that. But you are absolutely right in that the priorities that are set by Congress or any legislative body, they will move as quickly as they want for the things they want to get done. And you can really judge one's priority. People often say, show me your budget and I'll tell you your priorities. I'll know what they are by now. Okay. And with the power of the purse that Congress has, they know that they wield a tremendous amount of power and influence, and they can dictate on behalf of a nation that might be agreeable or not, precisely what they want our priorities to be by what they say we ought to remember and acknowledge. And you say a simple thing like police reform, it's a real complexity that they will talk about. And there's a reason for that, right? You've got a lot of different qualified immunity, whether you have an officer being able to be judged by a reasonable person standard or a reasonable officer standard. You've got the Supreme Court case law that obviously people will lean on and say, well, are they receptive to this or not? You've got individual police jurisdictions and the inability to have a national database about excessive force officers and beyond. And there's that just names 2 or 3 things, right? And yet something can be done about it. If there was the will, there would be the way. And I think what you point out rightly is there are the performative gestures that are meant to make a statement, and then there are the legislative gestures meant to make a difference. And I think the gesture was probably more easily accomplished, but it spoke volumes. It speaks volumes about the pace at which people go. And I think what it leads to are people feeling dismissed, feeling ignored, and also feeling as though the priorities that they would like representatives to focus on are just not expedited. And you'll see right now, here we are, days away from yet another government shutdown.
Yes.
It's not as if Congress is known for its quick pace. It's not as if they're known for, not waiting to the last minute. They're almost like, I have a 12-year-old and 11-year-old. I feel sometimes I'm like, Congress, this is like a Sunday night with my kids when I'm like, you got school tomorrow. What had to be signed? What was the paperwork? What do you mean you need football gloves? What do you mean you needed to have a permission slip? And what do you mean there was a project due? That's why I feel like Congress is sometimes. Now, I make light of it in the sense of equating to it, but there really is an immaturity that goes towards thinking that even as a paternalistic body that Congress is, they try to say they know best. They're not with their thumb on the right pulse at times. Now, you can remember whoever you'd like to remember. It's their prerogative to do so. But you point out that it comes at an expense, and it comes at a diminished sense of credibility for some who don't believe in it.
And I think, and someone just pointed out these quick stats about Charlie Kirk. He said he went on the record saying the civil rights in 1964 was a mistake. He said that the cost of it essentially is worth it as long as it's balanced out with our ability to still, obviously have the Second Amendment right. That few people had to die in order for us to keep the right. That he actually thought it was worth the cost, which is ironic based on how he passed away. He as destructive. Jewish community ruining American culture. And what's interesting is he said Michelle Obama, Roy Reid, Andrew Brown Jackson did not have the intellectual capacity to hold the roles that they had given. They were just black. So while I think no one celebrates or tolerates someone being assassinated, I think we have to remember also who this person was in life. And words have meaning, words are powerful. And, I say 2 of the 3 women I just named are also Black attorneys. So when I see someone like him, thoughts on people that look like me and have my background, sometimes people say, well, it's hard to have, obviously empathy or sympathy for someone. I can have empathy for a wife losing a husband, children losing their father, absolutely. But I think it's important to do your research and remember what people said and remember what people believed. And so just wanted to leave that there because I think sometimes after someone passes away, people want to gloss over some of the things they said or they believed. And I think it's important to put on the record these were some of the things that he actually believed when he was alive.
I'm not going to dignify the absurdity of what was clearly inaccurate and disrespectful and factually abhorrent statement. But I do think it's important as a society. And I will, I'm somebody who I don't agree with a lot of things that people say. And you won't agree with things I say. But the First Amendment is something we should hold sacrosanct. Nobody should die as a result of what they believe and say, but no one should be um, misguided into thinking that words don't have um, horrible impacts on the subjects of the conversation. I really think that, and I'm glad you point out, especially the Black women lawyers you point out, just as but a few examples, because I find as a mother, I am in a position, as we all often are, to try to undermine and to reverse a lot of the statements that are out there to make sure that our children and our future are guided by what is accurate, that they are worthwhile, that they are intelligent, that they should not be and cannot be defined by somebody else's bias towards them. And that when we're talking about remembering anything like any given day, I hope that we all remember that the second we allow ourselves to be defined by somebody else's bigotry, we have lost our self-worth. And that's what I'll remember on any day.
Absolutely. My sister says it best. She says, we have freedom of speech, or yeah, freedom of speech, she says, does not equal freedom of conscience. So yes, you can say whatever you want. But I think we have to, just because you can say whatever you want, doesn't mean in control of consequences that happen after you say what you say.
Well, legally, of course, there are certain statements, as you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that there are statements you can make that do have criminal consequences, that they're
inciting
violence, threats, etc. I mean, you could say, I joke around, like your mother can always tell you to be quiet, right? She can tell you she's gonna make me come back there, right? It's a very different ball game when you're talking about a threatening statement, inciting violence and beyond, and things far more serious. We do as a society already recognize there are those consequences. However, I would prefer, I live for a debate. I love a good debate. It's like that famous statement, I debate with my equals to all others I teach. I live for a good debate. I live for a good debate. But I don't want anyone to die for a debate.
Yeah.
I would like to make sure, because I believe, and this is the optimist within me, and so optimism requires equal parts naivete and equal parts intellect. But I like to think that as long as we're living and breathing, there is an opportunity to change minds. And my epiphanies are not your epiphanies. Right. But I wish there were opportunities to change people's minds based on interaction, based on research, based on exposure, and based on empathy and really understanding the law. And so when I see an opportunity lost to change a mind, that means it is adding on time before our society can evolve. And that's a consequence of not having to do it.
Absolutely. Moving on to our second topic, we have, there were two hangings of Black Mississippi, literally. And I always say, I always joke. I'm like, I know technically DC is on the Mason line, but I always say I don't really want to live too far below the Mason Dixon line, because there are literally some things that are still going on, like it's 1950, it's 1960, and my heart breaks for people that still live in towns and cities where they're almost frozen in time. And things like hanging is at some level normal, that it's still happening in 2025. And so in particular, there was Trey, who was a student at Delta State University, who was
a freshman, I think,
right, that was hung in the middle of campus. And so you think to yourself, even if, because again, we don't know this person's current mental health status, right? So we don't know anything that happened with Trey Reed up until the point of that. But generally speaking, it just sounds young student. Parents didn't know anything about him having any troubles with anything. For him to be hanging in the middle of the campus, and some people say, well, why are you focusing on the hanging part? I said, because the minute you, well, he was killed. I said, right. But I think for this person was not a black person. And I think what I was trying to explain was the minute you put hanging with a black person, we already know. Now, again, this is, again, assuming someone else did it, because, again, they're still doing their diligence in terms of what happened. So assuming that someone else, they have done it, the minute you put hanging with a black person, it immediately evokes a racial issue because of our history. I mean, our history isn't hangings of white persons, hangings of black people were a way to even scare the rest of the black community into doing things and not doing things. We obviously know about Emmett Till and, all the people that came before Trey Reed. And so it's just, they've done an autopsy. According to at least their initial results, they're saying it appears just to be a homicide. I'm sorry, a suicide. But again, his parents aren't buying it. They've hired Attorney Crump to be their and I think another reason why they're not buying it, because I did a little digging with this particular story. They said that they originally said, oh, he died in his dorm room. So how do we go from dorm room to you hanging this? I think if I was a parent, and I'm not a mom yet, but I know you're a mom, if someone told that your child passed away in one place, and then all of a sudden, in a very different place, in a very way, you're going to wonder, you're going to question it. So Colin Kaepernick actually joined with Ben Crump as a nonprofit, and one of the things it does these things. It actually pays for additional where it appears that something isn't consistent. And so I just want to hear your thoughts, number one, on maybe why, because you're at a huge network, like why maybe typically stories don't, there's so much going on. Like, why sometimes these stories don't maybe reach at your level. And then two, just your thoughts on Colin Kaepernick paying for this.
Let me begin first. Just my heart is just shattered thinking about what his parents must be going through. I mean, you have all these hopes for your child. Every single day of nurturing, of loving, of hoping, of caring for, and you hope that when you put them into the world will receive them, embrace them, and treat them like you would. We know that does not always happen. It does not hurt us any less. Even the most minor of slights, we will be heartbroken as mothers. This is anything but a minor slight. To know that your child is no longer with you, to be found hanging on a campus, far from home, or even anywhere, is just unbelievably tragic. And I know that they must be searching for answers, as anyone would, especially as you say, the hanging of a Black man in the South conjures up the images of lynching. And you wonder if this was something at the hands of somebody else, or whether it was, as they initially have stated, to be at his own hands. And I have as many questions as the other people to think about the issue. Part of being a prudent investigator, and I was a prosecutor, would have been mapping out what information I need in order to bring a case, if need be, convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, or at the very least indict for probable cause findings. Part of all those things requires me not to get ahead of my skis and know what stage in an investigation I'm in. Is it the infancy? Is it the skepticism is well-founded? Is it I have identified the bad actors and can do something about it? My research on this case so far has been that it's somewhere in the initial investigations where skepticism is rampant and not clear what the surveillance footage, if there is any, or electronic communication or people who were witnesses or people he has spoken to or anyone on a campus may have seen, I don't know where the ducks are in the row, but I find it very difficult to believe that on a college campus in the United States of America in 2025, where every cell phone becomes its own media network, where every angle of campus is going to be thinking about blue light telephone systems to guard against sexual assault, or you're talking about libraries or buildings that are going to have cameras for security at the very least, that no one saw anything to support a theory in particular. So when you ask about how these cases are treated by the national media, one of the things I'm always cognizant of is trying to ensure that the information that is gathered does not um, undermine the opportunity for justice to be served. It's a balance. On the one hand, you want to be able to give people the information on a timely basis, and I do. On the other hand, you want to be clear that you're not giving misinformation that can undermine the credibility of the organization, the investigation, or trigger the families the same vein. So it's difficult to do. But I'm very encouraged to know that it's not all on the decision making of one network, that it's people like Colin Kaepernick and nonprofits who say, you know what? I have the wherewithal to know that you can rely on the public autopsy findings, or you can also invest in your own, whether it's for peace of mind or the eye towards litigation or an eye toward prosecution, or I don't believe you, and there's the resources to do so. But I think it has to work as a greater network of effort. On the one hand, the media bringing attention, and Benjamin Crump can tell you, there is nothing that even compares to a media magnifying glass and microscope to suddenly light a fire for people who otherwise go, oh, that we've already decided that. They may go, you know what, let me hold on a second. Let me wait, hold on. There's a camera here, it's different. The challenge is, and I find that this is always a difficulty, the challenge is how do you keep the cameras there and the pressure on of making people know it's not just this family who wants answers. It is a bigger community. It's more than just the state. It's the nation. It is, issues of federal funding towards university. If there's some belief that there are students being treated differently than others on the basis of suspect classifications, it goes much broader than that. And so I am looking forward to hearing more information and getting some answers. But I am really encouraged that there is some movement into trying to find it independently as well. But I personally will follow the story and keep on it. And that's part of the importance for me of having the platform I do. And that is not having to always go, oh, well, because I have to tell you, I'm sure I ruffle more than a few feathers when I go, I get what you think the priorities of our audience is. I'm telling you what the priority of this audience is. And I try to extrapolate what I want to hear about, what I want to know more about, and bring it to the national audience. And sometimes that's in line with ratings. Sometimes it's not in line with ratings. But my form of advocacy is information. So so whether you like it or not, but I have to have good information. Otherwise, it undermines the credibility later.
Joshua Christo, he is right now serving a life sentence without parole. This time, he is working Innocence Project of Oklahoma. His case because they accused him of murder, but then he just turned 18, accused him of murder, honor roll student. That's what we call him, honor roll student. And so he's used the last 18 years to do more than what I would say the average person. He is in college while he's locked up. He's become a paralegal. He's become a minister. Wow. And so I think about the story because they actually tried lyrics as a way to convict him. Lyrics that weren't enough, an appeal. But then they filed exculpatory evidence that the prosecutors hid on his defense team at the time. Now that
18 years.
18 years. 18 years. And so it tells me, well, how come people don't, how do we get this story, on our, you do have local news now covering your story, like the BBC covered this story. So you start locally and that's how you work it up. He said, but my story is unbelievable. I didn't kill this person. The prosecutors hid this evidence. And then we get this zinger. His petition was too long. The page limit was too long. And they wanted to throw the petition out based on a page limit instead of his Innocence Project, just resubmitting it based on the correct. So they recently fought that battle and won that. Now is back in front of prosecutors to respond to post-conviction relief. So we're really happy about that.
What's his name?
His name is Joshua Crusoe. He goes by honor student. And that was a question that he asked me that I always wondered, well, how do these stories get up to the level of national, because I said, unfortunately, they're just bad stories everywhere. They're injustices every day. And it's not that your story is an injustice, but working with, me with the Black Lawyers Podcast and working with the local news, this is how you start to get your story out. So,
is it a mail? I have a lot of contact with people inside and who are desperate to have their stories told, and also desperate to even have the connection to the Innocence Project. I mean, I have referred more than one case to that, to every different entity across the country, and it's really, it breaks your heart that exonerations occur almost daily, if not, it should be more. But it really tells you about the system of justice where people are, put away and the key is thrown away, and they need to get their voices out there. There needs to be ways to make people aware of how they can do it by process. But I find time and time again, forget even the national or local news, at the very beginning, many people have no idea what the appellate process looks like or what they can do to even appeal. They believe that it's a financial thing, or they think, well, how do I preserve even an argument trial? Do I believe that my attorney was good for me, was actually an advocate or not? And there are so many steps that I think this smacks of a legal elitism that we have in this country that makes injustice far more frequent than it ever should be at all, because people are, a system is capitalizing on people not knowing how to navigate it. And that's why it's great to have podcasts like yours. That's good that people who are out there trying to even elevate these voices, but really is a larger conversation as well. Why wouldn't we if we believe in justice in this country, why would we not do everything we can to make sure that the system of justice that we trumpet is actually a just system, and that if we have an appellate process, shouldn't it be easy to navigate? If we know that there are factors and conditions that make an exoneration or exculpatory evidence, can come to light, why wouldn't we do so? What are we hiding? And if what we're hiding is the truth, then we don't have justice. We don't have a system of justice. And we have to judge our society based on, and I hate this phrase because I don't mean it in terms of a hierarchy, but the so-called least among us. I say the least among us meaning the least resourceful, who don't know where to begin. And we've got to stop as a nation pretending like everyone has a fair shot. Oh, well, you know what? Just it's in there. Yeah. You put it in. Right. Here's your timeline. Here's your page limit. Here's information. Right. I assume everything you really want to think. Those assumptions are some of the most dangerous because it makes us so complacent. I think many people who are good-minded, good-hearted, believe in the right things, would be shocked to know that exculpatory evidence would be hidden. No. Why would they ever do that? Why? Well, for the same reasons that this horrible story coming out of New York, Mr. Robert Brooks killed at the hands of correction officers, beaten within minutes of being transferred to a new facility while serving 12 years for stabbing his girlfriend back, I think, in 2016. Why would he be savagely assaulted and die the next day? Why was he given no explanation? Could there ever be one? There was no provocation. Why? Because the powers that be could, because they could do that to them. Why do we have injustices? Because we allow it to happen. Because there's not enough vigilance. Because we somehow believe that part of a prison sentence includes more than the time served. We condemn and we vilify, but I don't know how it can be consistent that you believe that the overwhelming number of people are going to come home. What are they coming home to? Mm-hmm. Especially the realization that there was not a just system.
Even if I did do it, imagine if I did. I don't know how I would wrap my mind around being in a place every day when I know I didn't do it. And so that's why I try to how do these news like why don't people care enough? And I said it's not so much that people care, but you carefully walk me through the process of how you vet stories and how things are balanced with ratings and interests and things at the time. In fact, his story would have not even come across my table if it wasn't for the Young Thug case where rap lyrics were used against him. Right. So I said, you do understand that because that case was going on, this is why your case even got my attention. So sometimes you even have to connect it to something relevant. So
to be clear, I wanted to make one correction. When we talk about ratings, when I speak about ratings, I say in spite of, I think of a good news organization cannot be guided by ratings. They have to be guided by, I think, a moral compass of information that needs to be out there. And so while I point out ratings in the sense of, I cover stories because I care not if this is going to be something that you feel like watching on a Friday night, right? Like, oh, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't make you feel good. That story is not a feel good story. Well, I'm not a morning, television program, which I love when you get to do like, right. That's what I'm doing. And so I think that people, I think it's all about the vetting of the stories and making sure you have the information, because there's a danger if you don't get it right.
I know.
If you don't get it right.
So I'm always double checking. I'm always Googling. I'm like, wait a minute, is it this?
Right. Or is it that?
Takes so you can go on the record and correct it as much as possible. You try to avoid that. I think important about what you're saying is information is your advocacy. That is your advocacy. So I think that is what helps you toe the line when you even do your own show. And that is actually why we're here today. So thank you for playing Hot Topics with me. These are topics I've been burning to talk to someone with, such as yourself. We're actually coming back this season with your episode. We've been on hiatus. We definitely wanted to come back with you. And there's just literally been so much going on in the last, 60 to 90 days that these were two topics kind of coming into today that I did want to discuss with you. So
I'm glad we did.
Appreciate you doing those hot topics with us. So we are here to talk about you. Obviously, there's some people that obviously already know you. They watch your show. But who were you before you became a lawyer, a chief legal analyst, an anchor? Who were you before all of this?
God, I hope I was still me the whole time. I hope that's the through line, that I was always Mara throughout it. But I was raised in Minnesota with St. Paul. Before that, Massachusetts and Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm the youngest of three. We're all ended up being lawyers. All my sisters. The law allows for that. We're all kind of drawn to it for very different reasons. For me, has been about the storytelling. I am somebody who has always been drawn to the stories of people who aren't able to use their voice. And I'm not a streaking violet. I'm not a wallflower. And I really believe that my calling is to be a champion for others. But it also requires me to be a champion for myself. So part of who I am is somebody who is really unapologetic about insisting that what I want is necessary and productive and fulfilling. And I started out as a lawyer, as a private practice practitioner in Minneapolis and New York doing intellectual property law, copyrights, defamation, First Amendment work.
That's my jam too.
Love it.
I love
it all. But I had this constant fire in my belly to do more for me, fulfilling work. And that included the Civil Rights Division, the voting section at DOJ in DC. And then ultimately, an assistant U.S. attorney here in Washington, D.C., handling violent crimes, sex offenses, and beyond, and doing the trial work along with policy and Maine Justice. And I just loved the work, but I felt like there is a muzzle that comes along with being within a department, because you learn all this information and insight, but you can't help others to speak truth to power because you are not able to describe the full spectrum of the work. It's a day to day. So I had an opportunity to take a leap of faith, and I did. I didn't know anyone in the media, didn't know anyone at CNN or any network or radio or any otherwise, but I said, I want to take a leap of faith, and I want to use my information as a kind of advocacy so that when people spoke truth to power, they knew what that truth was. And thought that in this humble body could be a megaphone.
Yeah.
And I have not let it go since.
Oh, that's amazing. And when you were in law school, you just mentioned intellectual property, which is my jam. That's my jam. Was that your favorite class in law school? Or did you have another favorite class?
Oh God, you know what? I loved. It's funny, I loved criminal law, but I loved constitutional law. That was my absolute favorite. And it was, period.
It's funny. That was the hardest course for me.
Really?
That was the hardest. I think it was probably my lowest grade.
Mm.
Thank you, my constitutional law teacher, for allowing me to pass so I could get my JD. He saved me. But in hindsight, I'm like, oh, now I see. Now I see why this is like really important. You really need to know constitutional law. I think at the time I was just like more in the academia mode. Oh, I have to memorize this and da 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 da. But like in my real world life of practice in law and media now, I totally understand why. So if you're in law school right now, you're listening to this. Yeah, it's very important. Figure out a way to enjoy it. It's very, very important.
Well, I'm a history buff, so that's part of it. I loved being able to connect those different parts, and I like to go around and really delve into the context around it, which is not surprising with the work I do now. That I love it, but I find it really it was compelling to me then, even more so now, because I'm not sure how you teach con law these days. I don't know how you teach history these days. I don't know how you teach precedent these days.
So many rules about what we can teach now.
The law school experience now must be totally different, because when we were in law school, I'm sure it was like, here's a precedent follow. Now you're like, there's no precedent. Right. And sometimes the Supreme Court says, yeah, some things say, this is changes. 50-year-old rule. Yeah, free speech.
Versus way. No, we don't have to do that anymore.
Guidelines, really. And so I look at my professors now, and I talk to them and been like, how are you doing it? And they just say, with effort.
Yes, with effort. Now, you mentioned all the various places you practiced prior to obviously coming to CNN. Was there ever a time, again, you're a woman, you're a Black woman, when you were in law school or just practicing, was there ever a moment where you felt like if you were maybe white or male, maybe you would have been treated a little? Was that what you did? I see you. I see why you're doing this. It's because I'm a Black woman.
I think people often at different points might have mistaken me, and I've had to teach them how to treat me. Thank you for that treat.
Thank you for everything.
For everything but the lawyer. I've sat in depositions before, and they've been sitting there looking at me and going, "Oh, are we getting started? Can you go call your boss?" And I'm like, "You just added a zero to your settlement." I just want to be clear about that. In that moment, I've had so many moments, even in academia, I've taught and have had people wonder. I like to think I look young, but I carry a backpack a lot too. I'm not trying to have a shoulder injury. I do love my bags. I carry a backpack necessary, and so I will walk into a courtroom with a backpack on, or in a classroom. I'll be like, "So who do you think our professor's going to be?"
Oh, yeah, I got that one. Yeah, I taught at Pepperdine Law briefly, and I just let them talk amongst themselves. And I was just kind of research professor. I was Google professor.
Always.
But I guess these students did not.
They don't.
I let them settle down and was just like, I wanted to like pull the analyst line, but I wasn't doing it. How to get away with murder. I'm teaching intellectual property at the time.
For you. I love that.
No, they're always, and here's the thing. I don't think there's a lot of viciousness with it all the time, but sometimes there's this. Go back to the Charlie Kirk comment. I think you're here because it's probably because you are a black, not because you necessarily earned the right to. Sometimes I get that feeling in some of those moments, and that's the thing that lights my fire. It makes me continue to do what I do.
It also makes you. I mean, generally speaking, I hate that we put that on ourselves, or we have to fend that off. And we do have fend it off. But what I try to do, and this is hard and it's a lifelong challenge, but what I try to do and I try to impart on other people is do not spend your time worrying about how others perceive you. It will distract and derail you, which is the goal. And so every second I give to somebody's assumptions about whether they think I'm supposed to be someplace, I have to just figure. I mean, I actually literally have in my home, I have a jersey and it has coats on the back. And I will figuratively, sometimes literally, put this on. And my kids would be like, oh God, who pissed off mommy? She got the Coach jersey on. What's someone do today? But I gotta put it on because I think I have to champion for myself the way I would my favorite athlete, the way I would somebody who I'm working with or for. I have to do that because the whole point, Toni Morrison tells you, the whole point of racism is to distract you from you're so busy fighting against that you lose the fight that you're supposed to be doing. And that's the point. So yes, have I had microaggressions? Have I had macroaggressions? Absolutely. Do I have to navigate minefields unlike some of my peers because there are assumptions that are favorable to them that are not favorable to me? Absolutely. But do I spend the bulk of my time worrying about that? No, because I refuse to spend my day trying to prove to you what I already know about myself. And I'll just instead focus my energy on that.
Absolutely. You just mentioned that quote. Are there any law school mentors or any lawyers you knew before you became a lawyer that were kind of guiding you prior to you becoming a lawyer that you?
Well, we all knew Maxine Shaw.
Yes.
That's the one.
I was gonna say, and actually, why I bring that up, I have a little gift coming to you. Yes.
Well, no, I mean, my sisters and I are all lawyers. I didn't know that many lawyers growing up. I can't think of lawyers that were not part of my family, certainly, and beyond. But what I did understand and knew from being a history buff was I was so completely intellectually enamored with Thurgood Marshall. That and the legal minds like Charles Hamilton, Houston, and beyond, the legal minds that were focused on using the system to beat the system. And that always spoke to me and inspired. But I had wonderful mentors at my law firms, those who looked like me and did not look like me, who really went out of their way to give me constructive and hard feedback. They didn't always feel good. And I say go out of their way, not they were singling me out, but I can take a note. And I am not somebody who is going to crumble and fold if you critique me. I'm gonna understand, I hope, I'm gonna understand the message, and then discuss the emotion with my mama later about like but in the matter of I'm gonna say I have found sometimes my tongue bleeds by just having to bite it while I receive the message. And just that pause gives me the ability to get better. But I had mentors who looked out for me, who taught me really well. Two of my really big mentors have since passed away. But what they taught me was invaluable. And one in particular, Eunice, who passed from an aneurysm a few years ago, the best advice she ever gave me had very little to do with the law and much more to do with balance. in life. And she said, I was a young associate, and she said, Laura, you're going to have to realize that you're always going to be juggling balls throughout your life. The key is figuring out which ones are made of rubber and which ones are made of glass. And you will know what are the glass balls because those are the ones you cannot drop. The rest will come back to you. And I had to take stock of my life and
What's
wonder
glass and
what's
what's
glass.
rubber?
For me, I know what my glass is, and those don't drop. And I refuse to let them drop. That's my family. That's my life. That's my children. That's my self-worth. That's that's my future. The rest, I balance dribbling it, right? Some they fall, but I might catch it. And so that's
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like, you're an adult.
you're that you'll be fine.
I know you're saying, like, we'll catch up.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
that's a
Just
good
know
one.
I'm doing the thing.
Yeah, just doing the thing. Yes, I love that. Not rubber versus glass. I love that. Now, fast forward, you get the CNN opportunity. You have your own show now, obviously. So how specifically does CNN just say one day, hey, would you like to come on? Because you said you didn't know anyone in media before. So how did you get that connection? And this is just something asking this question because sometimes people want to know,
Of course.
like, how do you even, sometimes it's just who you know, but in your particular case, how did that come about?
I wrote my way into my story.
Okay.
So I started with op-ed,
Okay.
picking out stories of different news markets. I didn't start with like my first op-ed for the New York Times. Like it was people have these very big ambitions. Like, oh, I know I'll do. I'll write that. Nope, and they'll publish it. No, my first op-ed was published at the Cleveland Plain Dealer. I sought out smaller markets, even though it's a major market, but smaller markets to write op-eds and legal matters and find legal stories to talk about in local markets as well. I also did radio for some time. Shout out to Urban View and Karen Hunter on Sirius XM and Pete Dominic, who had a show on Insight on Sirius at that time and then went on later. And seeking out opportunities that required me to do the work and get this skill set and practice. And so when I started, it was through writing. And I'm scrappy. So it's like I say, if you made me, make another one. Like I'm never sitting back waiting for someone to give me something. I mean, it was as an entrepreneur, it is summer. I remember thinking I worked very hard when I worked for a business. I worked so much harder working for myself because you have to, right? You really have to. But that's how I started out writing. And then also, if you tell someone you're an expert, you better not make that not applicable to you. So you have to do the work. You have to research constantly. And when you're on air, especially for television, sometimes you know the topic in advance. Sometimes you're responding to warnings. You have to have a depth of knowledge and also learn about the things that verbally make you credible and don't undermine it. And then finally, one thing people have to realize is you have to understand what goes into how you see someone as credible.
Okay.
And then do that. Right. And I mean when I say that, you cannot expect someone to believe you're objective when you're not objective. You cannot make someone believe that you have no agenda when you only tout your agenda. Okay. And you cannot believe that people believe that you are for the people when you've only ever made it about yourself. Social media can make you fall into a trap. You will listen to a mob. You will try to placate that mob, whether that's your mob or someone else's. But you have to figure out who you are because that's the only sustainable thing. And who I am is a writer and a storyteller and an advocate. And that's what I maintain. But for me, that was my path to getting there. And really, it wasn't glamorous. Frankly, it's still not glamorous. I just do a really great job on my makeup.
Well, that was my next question. What do you like the most and what do you least like? Because again, it appears very glamorous. So what do you like the most and what do you would say, oh, I could pass on this. This is very difficult.
I like the most being able to bring stories and a voice and a sense of validation to people that what is happening is real and matters and that the world wants to hear. That really is the best thing for me, bringing the stories that I think are so important for people. And I use the word stories not to fictionalize it, but that's how I see people and experiences as stories that connect us all. So I like that. I like the education aspect of it, being able to help people, give them the tools to know how they can begin thinking about it. I don't do anything different really than I was as even a prosecutor. I present evidence to you. You decide what you want to do with it. Sometimes you see the verdict that I think you should. Other times you don't, but that's your choice to do. So I enjoy that part. What I don't like sometimes is I think that people oftentimes believe that um, that being a journalist requires you to be a lecturer. And they'll say, I wish you would ask this question. Had that been me, I would have gone off on the person. And why didn't you say this? And why didn't you say that? And I think, well, I asked somebody to come do an interview, which means I want to hear what they have to say. Let them have however much rope they need.
Yeah, they can go as far, right.
Hearsay. I've asked you to come. I want to hear from you. I already know how I feel about it. So I think people sometimes mistake an interview for a lecture. And if you want me to give you a lecture, you can feel free to read whatever I want to write. But that's I think people mistake what is an effective interview.
Like from your show, as I mentioned before, it's not like a morning show. So it's right before people are probably already in bed, probably watching you. So what should they expect? Why should they stay up and listen to your segment?
They have heard the news throughout the day, and they have an opinion about it. But there's always something missing to push the conversation ahead. And I think my show answers the question that people are thinking, which is, well, what about this? And all right, I understand that, but then now what are you going to do about it? And now what? My show answers not only what has happened, but what now and what's next, and gives people a sense of agency over being able to move the needle forward.
Absolutely.
And it's fun.
And it's fun. It's fun. Yeah, so nightly shows are fun. Last question. I say this quote all the time on this show. Less than 5% of lawyers are Black. And that statistic, for whatever reason, it just will not go up. For me, for the last 20 years, it's like I researched it. It's always hovering at like 4.75, not quite 5%. So what is your recommendation? I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with being a content creator, an actress, a singer, all these other different things. Like, be what you want to be. But somebody's got to be the lawyer. Somebody's got to be the doctor. Somebody's got to be the teacher. Some of these traditional professions. How do we kind of encourage the next generation that these jobs are worth looking into? They can be fun too. What is your advice on us increasing that 5%?
Well, recognizing that the law is not one size fits all in terms of being it's not. Well, I guess the law is something that can really appeal to everyone. It is, if you are somebody who is drawn to storytelling, if you're somebody who is drawn to information as power, if you're somebody who believes that you can make a difference in not only the lives of an individual person, but as a society as a whole, you should consider the law. The law is not just in a corporate space. It's not just in a courtroom. It's not just inside of a policy space. It can be all of those things and more. And I think the more people realize how flexible and malleable the law is, I mean, it's a way to think. It's a way to distill information, to be discerning, and it's a way to educate. And I think those things are universally appealing.
And actually, one more question. We met at the Diddy trial. His sentencing is, I think, in another week or so. We'll probably go back up there.
Yeah.
I know prosecutors are typically looking for 2 years or more, at least, at a minimum, for his case. He's obviously looking for mostly time served. What stood out? Because there were so many things. I mean, it was almost like watching a reality show. But is there one thing that kind of really stood out about kind of being right there and witnessing, as far as I'm concerned, one of the cases of the century?
The court of public opinion meeting the court of law, and the tensions between the two was one of the most fascinating. The content, so difficult to hear. The abuse allegations and
right. It's hard to sit through.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Right. But if you look at it intellectually in terms of what people thought should happen and what did happen, and the burden of proof, what that really looks like, I think people were really surprised to hear that what was discussed in the court of public opinion could not come into the courtroom of law.
Mm.
And that the court of law could not persuade the court of public opinion.
Right.
And so there was this constant tension that I found really fascinating generally. But there was also a real insight into prosecutorial discretion.
Mhm.
Why some cases are brought under some charges,
Right.
while others are not, and why and who. And it in many ways made people question and challenge our ideas of justice in ways I didn't think people had not anticipated. It was one of the first or so. I think probably think about Cosby, Weinstein, Diddy. Some of the three post Me Too, if you can see, right, we're still within post Me Too cases, and how each one was treated in different and discussed, even within months and years of one another, showed a dramatic shift in our vital viewpoints on things. And I found it just fascinating to hear people's preconceived notions, doubling down, and refusal to change their mind.
Oh, yeah. I was and sometimes I was sitting in like the overflow room, and I'm like, can I find anybody on the prosecutor side? I would be full. And I said, well, you know what? But it also gave me a clue as to what I thought was going to happen. I said, if the jury is anything like the people that I'm sitting next to, which is the average New Yorker coming in just to watch it, they're not buying it, and I don't think the prosecutors are going to bring the verdict. I wasn't actually very shocked at the verdict.
No, anyone who was there, I just you thought I
We
would
kind of saw where it was going, right?
Colleagues who hadn't been there,
Like,
they're like, no, of course. And I was like, and I remember sitting there and being told, no, Laura, of course, it'll be guilty on everything. And I was like, no, I'm telling you, you'll only be guilty on these two charges.
yeah.
And they were like, no, there's no way. No. I was sitting there and watching the jurors, how they listen to information, also seeing how prosecutors build their case. And I'm gonna
you know how it's critical done. Yeah. You didn't quite.
But there were, I mean, both sides. They had extraordinary lawyers.
Yes,
both sides.
absolutely.
That's the way the proverbial cookie crumbles. It's up to the jury to decide.
Sure, it's not up to the lawyers and it's not up to the judge. But what I'm saying was we always end on a good note because you're in the news, so there's so much negativity around, right? So we try to end with a good note. We actually already spoke of one of our Black excellence moments of the week, Colin Kaepernick with doing the autopsy. I think that's amazing. I think it's amazing you even have a foundation that's one of the things it does. It literally pays for second autopsies. I didn't even know it. But also, Miss Gates, I believe it's Melinda Gates, Bill Gates' former wife, is giving additional money to HBCUs, which is coming at a great time because based on our administration right now, we're not receiving as much for DEI programs or anything related to DEI. So the fact that she is taking the money, they always say, well, you can't take your money to your grave, right? Is it Mackenzie or is it Melinda?
I think it's
We'll say Miss Gates.
I think it's is it Bezos' ex-wife? I can't remember now. But yes. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes. They are donating, their foundation is donating to HBCUs. So they're giving extra money to HBCUs. And I mean, this is a great time to do it. So if you're looking to donate somewhere, definitely HBCUs could use the funds. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming in. Our audience who is listening are big fans of yours, of course. Like I said, a lot of people already watch your show, but I like to do these interviews because I like to just find out a little bit more about the actual person behind the computer. It took a lot. It's work, but it also took a lot for you to get where you are. And I try to remind people that are coming up behind me, behind you, that we're not here just because we just plopped into these positions. Like you said, you have to go after it. You have to work for it. You have to know yourself for letting that be one of your glass balls. I'm going to remember that, letting that be something that you never drop. And then, you'll be okay. So
I'm proud of you. I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, sis, and I'm proud.
Thank you. And this has been the Black Lawyers Podcast. Until next time, take care.